and resume recording. Larry, I can see your face.
Yes, I'm here now. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Let me share the screen here. So we're going to be 5 minutes, well, a couple minutes to let the rest of the people to join. We are a bit like 5 minutes late, which is kind of expected because, well, this is an online meetup. So sorry for that. And Mark is joining in a bit as well. We have Larry around. And yeah, meeting will be starting in a couple minutes. Welcome everyone, and thank you for attending the second online CakePHP Meetup. And this is Jorge González, and I'm gonna be hosting this one. But a lot of other people is gonna be talking, so I'm gonna be co-hosting somehow. We will have Mark Story opening the event, presenting something quick because he does not have so much time today, and he was basically pulled into the event a couple days ago. So thank you for that, Mark. And then we will have Mark Scherer, Mark, talking about making a new plugin from scratch and doing some tests on it using TDD. And last, I will be talking about Authorization plugin, integrating Authorization plugin in an existing project and discussing about the new features about Authorization available. And that's going to be it. We are going to be flexible and accept any questions at any time. We will have time for lightning talks sometime at the end of the event. And this is an online meetup, so if you want to say something or you have some crazy idea you want to present, we will have room for you, and we will be very happy to have you there as well. So feel free to ask questions, interact with others, and have fun, which is the ultimate objective here today. Basically, you learn something, have fun, and share something. Okay, so Mike is here. He's going to say a word about Ring Central, which is the tool we are using today, and also it's going to be the tool that we are going to use in CakeFest, the online event this year. I've been using Ring Central for today's event, and it looks good. And well, Mike will have more details about it. Go ahead if you want.
Awesome. Thank you, Jorge. First, a huge thank you for letting me attend this and be here with all of you today. I was telling Jorge that Cake is actually the first PHP framework that I used in my professional PHP career, and 15 years later, I couldn't be more grateful for the support of everyone in the community. So first off, a huge thank you to everyone. The first question I see in the chat is, hey, isn't this Zoom? Like, this looks like Zoom. And the answer is it's a white labeled version of Zoom. So Ring Central is a communication provider. So we basically provide a solution to allow businesses to communicate via voice, SMS, team messaging, meetings, and fax, all with a single solution, single app. And as part of our meeting solution offering, we partnered with Zoom, where we actually work with Zoom, work on the code base, and try to make sure it's secure, and then we incorporate Ring Central's voice capabilities. We also have our own meeting solution that just launched, but for webinars, we still use Zoom, and we have a great partnership with Zoom. The big thing I want to throw out there is if you're interested in communications, if you're adapting to work from home, or the challenges that present to us, with Ring Central, it's a fantastic solution. You get a free trial, but more importantly, we have a free developer environment, so you can actually build your own communication apps. You can use voice, SMS, team messaging, meeting, and fax to really communicate, and that's at developers.ringcentral.com. This is also, I'm not in sales because I'm a terrible salesperson. So with that, I'll just simply say thank you again for everyone who's here. Thank you to the CakePHP community, and Jorge, I'll pass it back.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So the first, and again, we're going to use the tool for hosting CakeFest this year. So this is kind of a learning process. Please forgive me or forgive us if we are not familiar with the tool yet. We're going to be using these kind of events as well, and also the training we do at training.cakephp.org to train about the tool and improve ourselves as well, and also be able to host a great online CakeFest event by later this year. Okay, so yeah, that's one thing. Next today is going to be Mark's story. So go ahead, Mark, and say something, and
yeah,
go from here.
All right, I'm gonna share a screen in a minute, but before that, I'll just do a quick intro. I don't think I've met virtually everyone, so it's impossible. So yeah, I'm Mark. I'm principal engineer at Sentry during the day, where we do like error reporting and monitoring and working on performance monitoring tools to make code better. And then the evenings I work on a project called Stickler CI, which is like a little SaaS business I run on my own. And then I work on Cake. And I've worked on Cake for 11 or 12 years now. Yeah, and I'm going to show some of the new features coming to the ORM in 4.1. These features were not written by me. They were contributed by Other Corey and NDM2. So big thanks to them for getting these features done, because I think they're pretty cool. I think they're going to fit into an interesting piece of the ORM and unlock a lot of powerful features that we have not been able to The two features I'm going to show are common table expressions and window functions. They are separate but adjacent features that leverage like really powerful SQL features that are offered in Postgres SQL Server SQLite of all places, and then in MySQL 8, and I think MariaDB, but I don't know the versioning on MariaDB at all. So let's talk about window functions. So window functions let you generate aggregations for like windows of your data. And you can define what that window is by telling the database how you want to partition your data. So some of the problems you can solve with window functions are getting a comma-separated list of tags in an article. You could get the percentage of total views that something has. You could get running totals for time series data. You can compute values based on other data in adjacent rows. So if you define your window, you define windows with an ordering, and then your window function can look at like slices of the data. And so you can compute values based on that. So a use case of this could be like figuring out the time between train stations. So a train leaves station A at 9 o'clock and arrives at station B at like 10:15, and you want to know the duration of that interval. So instead of computing it and storing it, you can use a window function to compute it based on, you can look back one row and calculate the difference between two rows. Or you can do it based on like free time in a calendar, all that kind of stuff. So I've got a little app cooked up. I built it last night. It's not very good, but we're going to use it anyways. So to find the window. Hopefully it's this one. I think I'm sharing the right one. Yeah, I'm sharing the right one now. Okay, so I got a little window here. No, don't do that. It's going to move some stuff around. Okay, I've got a little application in this terminal. Just going to switch terminals. Okay, so I use Vim. I'm sorry. I don't know how to use good editors. All I know how to use is Vim. So I've got this editor little application, and we can kind of look at the schema, which is very similar to the like basic content management tutorial that we have. So there's like some tables and some data jammed into it, and then some articles and some tags, and that's going to be kind of the foundation for what we're using. Yeah, so here's like a SQLite prompt, and you can look at tables. If you've never used SQLite, it's great for doing prototyping. It has a slightly different SQL variant than other databases, but I find it quite good for doing like little prototypes. Also, I'm a very bad typist, especially when I have to do demos. Yeah, so that's SQLite. And then I've built this like really terrible shell that'll run things. It doesn't do anything yet because I haven't put anything. So I'm just going to switch over to a window and copy and paste some examples. And so what we're going to do is just get the total order, the total views, like a running total of the view count. Okay, so like we'll create this into, pull it out of the oven already finished. So the new piece is this code right here. And what we're doing is we're creating, this creates a window function. And so the functions, the window functions, you get to them through the functions builder. And then you choose an aggregate. Now, normally, if you were to aggregate inside of a query without a group, as this query has no group, you would get just one row. Or you'd have to like put a distinct on all the other fields, and then you would get one sum for everything, right? Like you'd get just one sum per row, or you couldn't get like a running total. Like it'd be impossible. So what window functions let you do is take an aggregation function, which is sum in this scenario, and then allow you to decide how the data is split up. So where the windows are, which are the partitions. And so we're going to split it by user because we want to get a running total per user. And then we're going to decide how the data is ordered. So this is just saying that like inside of each window, order the data ascending. And then, you know, take the current, 0 means the current row. So take the current row and then go to the end of the window. You can also do things like, you know, take the current row and then end 2 rows further down in the window. You can do a couple of options like that. You can do, you know, start 1 row after the current row. So the functions you can use to make windows, there's sum, there's average, there's min and max. There's a few special window functions like lag and lead, which go back and forward 1 row. There's row number, which lets you count the number of the row inside the window, which can be useful if you're doing like ranking. There's also rank, which allows you to rank order objects. So if you need those types of, like, if you ever wanted to compute a rank inside of a set, yeah. So then I'm just going to order the data by user and by views, and then turn hydration off so that the debug output is not crazy. And then we'll just run this. And of course, nothing happens because it didn't save. And then it prints something out. So this is another Cake4 feature, which is the terminal output is colorized, which is another nice little nicety. It also colorizes in HTML. And the theme works on both simple 8-bit ASCII codes. I've also like set up my app to log queries. So this is the query that got generated. So you can see the window function right here. So the sum of articles view. And then this over piece is what turns it into a window function. And we didn't say over in our code, but as soon as we use partition or order or any of those like windowing functions, Cake knows to implicitly convert this into a window function. There is like a hard mode version of this as well that I'll show in a bit. Yeah, so this is like a window function. Partition by, order by, rows between current and unbounded following. And the ORM will actually handle converting this into each SQL dialect as required. So if you're using MySQL, this kind of piece will work just fine. The thing that won't work exactly the same in all databases is the strings you put inside these functions. We don't translate those. You have to kind of do that yourself. Okay, so we ran that function, and then we get this running total. So views starts at 200, goes to 200. Then we add 10 more views, and we have 210. And then we add 5 more views, and we get 215, right? And then the next row changes users, and the count starts over 800. That person only posted one article, so that's how they get. There's 200, goes there, 200 at 100, it gets to 300, we add another one, it goes to 301. So you can do interesting stuff like show running totals over time, or you can, like, if you're generating time series graphs, you can generate both the cumulative and the record value. So that's one use case for like window functions. And then we could do something similar where we want to get like the average number of views. So let's say every row we wanted to have the average number of views as well. So then we can run that. And then each one will have the same average. So you're able to do a group in you'd be able to do like aggregations inside an ungrouped query, as long as you can define a window for those aggregations to be applied on. And then another thing that I find helpful is a lot of times you'll be working on window functions, because you're going to all do it all the time now, and you won't be able to getting what's going on inside the window. It's sometimes tricky. So there's this extra function, which I chose intentionally to show one of the hard mode features, is the aggregate function, which also makes an aggregate expression. And then inside of that aggregate expression, you can pick like platform-specific functions. So in SQLite, it's called group concat. It changes based on which database flavor you're using. And then I'm just telling the ORM to like stick articles view in there as a literal argument, and then put a comma as a literal string, and that there's no extra parameters. There's no types for this, like no input value types. And then the last one is like, what does this function produce? And I tell it to produce a string. The aggregate function assumes that the output is going to be a float, but we want it to be a string in this case. And then when we run that one, you can see the values joined together with a comma. So you can do like 101, and then you have 200, 101, 800. You can kind of see what's going on inside the window function. So group concat can be useful in of itself as like it can produce useful data. It's also useful for debugging what's going on inside the query engine. Okay, so that's window functions. The next thing I want to talk about is common table expressions. So common table expressions, often abbreviated to CTE, which is terrible. It allows you to create intermediate result sets and then use those as tables to base other queries on. They serve a similar purpose to like views or derived tables, and they differ from derived tables in that you can use a common table expression multiple times in a single query. And this allows you to avoid like performance problems. It also allows you to decompose a really complex query that has multiple derived table joins into smaller queries that you can kind of like understand in logical blocks, and you can kind of combine them together. Without performance penalties, they are similar to views, but different from views in that you don't have to incur the cost of maintaining them. Common table expressions are not materialized into the database. They don't contain any metadata. They don't have indexes. You can't like break them by deleting them. They don't actually exist. They're not real things. They only exist while a query runs. Yeah, so what we're going to do today is we have a table that has all the tags, and we want to show a list of articles and how many tags are applied to that article. So you could do this with like a counter cache as well. We're going to do it with a common table expression because that's what fits inside of a demo. But you can do a lot of things with common table expressions. I've used them before to build reporting queries. They're super helpful for building like reporting or analysis queries. Or if you have like a big, hairy derived table join or like unions, you want to join them all together, using common table expressions is a good pattern to use. So there's a lot going on here, so let's look at it one piece at a time. So the first piece is we call query with, and the with function turns on, you can either provide it a common table expression or you can provide it a function, and that function gets the expression that you then have to populate. You also get a reference to the current query. We're likely going to change this so that you don't have to do this yourself. I was talking with other query today, but just changing this interface so that you get a new blank query. And then from there, I'm just setting the repository. This is so I can kind of cheat and use, get some of the typing information from the ORM, but I have to switch the table, so you have to use repository. So then I'm going to select the article and the tag count. So I'm going to get a count of every tag that's attached to an article from the article's tags table, which is this junction table. And then I'm going to group it on article ID. And then I'm going to name the common table expression because they all need to have names. And so then I make it, I call it tag counts. I set the query, so that's what the query is going to be. And then that's the end of that. So that's the common table expression is now set. If you fail to return a common table expression from this builder, you'll get an exception. Yeah, and it has to have a name and it has to have a query. And then from there, I can do a query. So I can update my original query, which is I'm going to select the title and the tag count using this alias. And this alias is the alias of the common table expression. So it actually like quacks like a table, and we're going to join against it. So we're doing a query on the articles table, which we did on 144. So here's the articles table. And then it quacks just like a table, so you can join against it. You can't use the ORMs like inner join with, so you can't do inner join with on the text counts. If you try this will not work. Don't try this. The reason this doesn't work is because the ORM doesn't know about this table because it's not really a table, right? It's just like a thing that kind of exists in the database for a very short period of time. So then we just declare like a join against the tags table, the tag counts table. And I just set the conditions as a string because I was being lazy, but you can use an array, whatever up to you. And then I turn off the hydration just to make it fit inside of the term. Just gonna write that, and then the screen and run that one again. And you can see the query up here. So you can see with tag counts, and then there's a whole SQL query in that with statement. And one of the interesting things with common table expressions is you can have multiple. So let's say you're building a reporting query and there's like multiple dimensions you need to tie in together into a central query. You can factor all those dimensions into common table expressions, attach them all to the query, and then join all the dimensions together into one kind of root query. So you can imagine I could have a reporting query with like 4 or 5 common table expressions. Then we kind of join them all together. So I go from the articles and then I left join the tag counts on, just in case some of them don't have tags. And then our results are like the CakePHP 4.1's coming. There's 2 tags. It has window functions. There's 4 tags. It'll have table expressions. There's 3 tags. So this is another way you can kind of attach aggregations to a root query without having to figure out how to like hydrate everything together inside the ORM. So it's a bit of a trivial. Both of them are kind of trivial demos, but needed everything to fit into the little screen while I do a demo. Obviously, you'll be able to find examples online of like how to use common table expressions to build much more complex queries. But yeah, this is 2 new things that are coming in the ORM soon. Thanks for listening. I can take any questions as well if people have questions. I'm going to stop sharing. Just reading the chat. Is common table inherently help performance, or does it exist to provide syntactic sugar? It depends. It depends on the database. So what a common table expression will help optimize is if you're using derived table joins or derived tables in general, every time that derived table is repeated, most database engines will re-execute that fragment of query. Whereas with a common table expression, it'll be hoisted to the top, and then an intermediate result set will be generated, and then that intermediate result set is put into a temporary table or on file system, depending on how your database is configured, and then it joins against that temporary result versus re-executing the query multiple times. So it can provide better performance. You have to really like profile it based on the type of query you're doing. I don't know if there's any other quick questions that kind of came up. All right. I have to jump off because I got to go back to work. But thanks for listening and enjoy the rest of the meetup.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much. Yeah, I know you need to leave, so hope you're around.
Right. Yeah, I have more meetings I have to get to for work. I'm sorry.
No problem. No problem at all. We'll try to do this every month, so you have your chance. Bye. Share here. And so second topic for today, Mark, are you here? Other Mark.
Other Mark.
Oh, hi, Mark.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. I'm happy to go either last or second last. So if someone wants to jump in, because I still need to boot up PHP Storm and stuff.
Okay, no problem. I can do it from now. So the topic was making a new plugin and TDD for it, but we are jumping into authorization plugin. So before we jump into it, if you have any other questions or comments before anything related with a meeting, is everybody all right? Audio is going through, things like that. You can use a chat. I'm going to watch a chat. We also have a Q&A feature that we can have it for management. Maybe if you have questions about other topics that you would like to do for later, you can use the Q&A button and ask your question there, and we will basically wrap those questions later or at any time. And also, if you want to do some presentation later in our lightning talks, think about it and jump in if you like. So today, well, jumping into authorization plugin, that's fine. I hope we can get it through. I guess you see my screen with the slides, and after this one is this one. Well, this is me, Jorge González, and this is my nick. So if you find me there in Twitter or in Slack, you can ping me if you have specific questions later on. Here's my email, jorge.gonzalez@cakedc.com. I work at CakeDC and also handle the training usually at the Cake Software Foundation training courses we do through training.cakephp.org. And well, basically at CakeDC, we do all kinds of things we did with CakePHP. We usually handle client projects and consultancy and, well, training services, and also we try to support the CakePHP community as much as we can. Then, jumping into topic, I'm going to talk about the authorization plugin today, which is basically related with questions we got from the previous meetup, because there was an introductory talk about authentication plugin. So this was like the next thing to talk about, which is authorization. What I'm going to do is we're going to cover authorization through an example. So we're going to hack together an example here. Hopefully it will work. And again, I'm open to any questions or comments on how I'm doing it. First thing I'm going to do is basically I have a local project set up that you can get from here. This is the project I use in the unit tests training session. Let me get a browser window for it and show you here. Around here. Okay. So then, well, this is well, a very simple project. I think I created this one for CakeFest like 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I don't remember. And I recently upgraded code from Cake 3 to Cake 4 and integrated with authentication. So we have a fresh start for today under the branch Meetup. So if you go to this branch, let me paste the URL for you. There, hope you get it. And basically, this is a game project, or a very simple example project that we are going to use today for hacking through authorization and try to understand the new features that we have available. So what we have here, first thing is I'm gonna launch an IDE, and if you take a look at the project, this is basically a CakePHP 4 project. Composer, show PHP. We have well, a PHP 4.07, and we already started setting up authentication and authorization plugin using Composer require authentication and authorization, right? So once we have the plugin installed, and if we take a look at the project as it is right now, you see, well, this is a pretty straightforward project with some tables to define what a game is, the moves inside of a game, tournaments, and users to basically do login, right? If you take a look at the project, it's going to be something like this. Meetup for that. Oh, okay. So this could be related with the debug kit. Let me try to get this done. Okay. Permission denied on airlocks. Okay. Okay. Some permissions on my local. Okay. Okay. This is expected. And I need to check if there is an identity here. Sorry for that. Just okay. So we have a login. I already created a user. You can download the project and register like this, and you can register using the first name, last name, email, password. Once you're registered, you can basically log in to the project, and then you have this interface where you can create a new game, best of 3 moves, for example, and you can pick rock, paper, scissors, lizard, spock, and the computer will pick another strategy randomly. In this case, I pick paper, and the computer picks lizard, so computer wins. And the second move is I pick lizard, and sorry, computer won the game. And now I have 1, 2 versus 4 loss, whatever percentage. Okay, pretty basic stuff. So now we can take a look at what we did to integrate the authentication if you want, which is basically we are using both plugins under, well, let's talk first about the authentication, the integration we did on the project. We integrated authentication through here on the, well, if you take a look at it, you can see it easier this way, maybe. If you look at what we did, and you can see that, and the project, we initially had this project implemented with using our good old auth component. Here are the changes we did for switching from auth component into authentication, basically adding the new authentication middleware and then configuring the authentication in this way. So let's take a look at what we did. Basically, if you go to your application, PHP, you see here we are defining a number of middlewares. One of the middlewares defined is the new authentication middleware. And we are passing actually an object, an instance here that will help us to configure the authentication. If you read the documentation, okay, you read the documentation about the authentication, it's usually noted as something like this, right? Where you pass the application itself to configure the authentication middleware. That's okay. I'm just using another class for handling the configuration of the authentication to basically try to keep the application classes as clean as possible in this case. So I created a new class, app auth, under the auth folder. It's this one, app auth. You can name it whatever you want. And basically this class is now implementing the authentication service provider interface that forces you to add one method to get the authentication service. The authentication service will be a method where you can basically configure how authentication is going to work. In this case, we are creating a new authentication service and ensuring that the identifier is going to be password, and with the configuration to use email as the username. And then we have we're loading the authenticators, which are basically the session authenticator and the form authenticator. Meaning that if we already have an identity in the session, we are authenticated, so we stop at this point. If we don't have one, and we are in a form, which is this one, and we are posting the form, and we have a username and a password present, we will pass it to the authenticator, to the form authenticator to try to log in the user in, right? So even if this is not the scope of the talk today, it's good to get in place and discuss what we have in the application. So you know, we now have an application that is using authentication plugin to basically to allow authentication. Then let me check here. I think there was a question maybe here in Slack somewhere. No, not for me at least. Okay, so then we have here, after working with the authentication, you will need to ensure that you have some kind of users table like this one, controller, users. You will have some method to actually do login on it, which is basically copy pasted from the book. So we're doing nothing fancy here, just checking that the authentication has a result and the result is valid. So you will have a valid authentication target so we can get going. In this case, you redirect to games play. This logic here would be similar to what we did before with the auth component login redirect parameter. And then if not, you will basically say something like invalid user password and flash it, right? Logout will do authentication logout, and register will basically create a new user, fetching from the request as you might have noticed, and flagging the user as active and as super user for now, right? Because we want it. Obviously, this is not a real application, so we don't care too much. Then, once we get to this point, we are able to log in and log out in the application. When you're logged in, and in the application, you see that the request, sorry, you will see that the session will hold the user that is authenticated in a similar way, but again, also in a totally different way than auth component. If you remember, auth component will store the user, but not as an object. In this case, we have the user as an entity in the session, and also we will have a way to get the user from the request using the identity attribute. Once we get to this point, the next question would be, okay, now we have a way to log into an application. How can we configure authorization in the application? Well, the first thing would be we go and check one thing I was also wanted to share here, I don't know if you want to hear it or not, but I think it could be useful, is this thing. I don't know if you are, I know a lot of people are using Vagrant or Docker, especially Docker nowadays, for setting up projects. That is totally fine. I found using Docker is very, very useful, especially for complex projects. But for the typical toy applications that you might have and you want to run them quickly, this setup I have could be useful for you. So I'm going to show you how I usually do it, so you know what's going on when I set up the project. I picked var virtual as the root folder for all my Cake applications. Then I have a local Nginx configuration, and I have also a local DNS configuration Again, I'm going to show you in a bit. So I'm using Linux, but I believe this should be something that you can configure in other environments as well. So DNS mask is a tool in Linux that allows you to capture some addresses with a specific name and then redirect them to some other place, right? So it is like an override to a DNS service that runs locally. So this way, if you take a look at the DNS configuration I have, this one, I'm having all these addresses configured to whatever domain I put on here on top. This suffix will redirect the domain to localhost, right? So if I go to my browser right now and I say something like anything .4dev, it's going to localhost. It doesn't matter. So then next thing, the next moving part in this setup is Nginx configuration. So in sites enable, I have a Cake4 configuration like this one, right? This server name will catch all my domains ending in 4dev, and they will point the domain to the same folder under var virtual, and then create a specific configuration for the access and the error log. And once you see, well, if you see this is a standard, the rest of the thing is a standard configuration for CakePHP. And here I'm using a specific PHP version, and also I'm passing some environment variables like my transport and debug mail. So, well, I will need to change my transport after this, after this one. And also, well, my database configuration, which is by default my app secret. Okay. Next thing I usually do is, next thing I usually do is I create a user that is an admin user having my app secret as the username and the password in MySQL. So now what we have is, if I go, you can do it this way. Let me copy this URL for you. Okay. So if you clone any project at any time, and you do migrate after creating a new database, which is the only thing that is not automated. For example, this is the only thing I need to do. It already exists, but this is the only thing you need to do to set up a new project from scratch in your local environment. And then you can go to Meetup. Everything is configured. You don't need to touch app.php if you don't want to. Oh, okay. Let me try to make this better. Then you can basically try to take a look at the configuration. If you use a default configuration and you go back here and you do Meetup for that, you have everything in place, okay? And with the benefit that you're not using localhost, which sometimes do weird things, loading assets or regarding the security configuration of the site, etc. But you get a real virtual host working with a real project, and your rewrite also is looking good. So that's one way. The other way is doing bean cake server, right? But well, you know that one already. So I wanted to share this one. I don't know if this is going to be useful for you, but it saves me a lot of time. So hopefully it could save you some time as well. So we have a toy application Meetup, right? And what we want to do now is add an authorization layer on top of it. if you read about the authorization plugin, you will see there are quite a few new concepts. Well, not new concepts, but different naming for existing concepts in auth component as we know it. We have, for example, now we have a middleware in the authorization layer. We have a resolver, which is going to be basically a way to determine what's the policy for a given resource. We will have the concept of a resource, which is basically anything. We will have the concept of the policy, which is going to be a set of rules to decide if a given user will have permission to do some specific action or not over the resource. And then we have a component that is something that we are going to be using to basically check the authorization through our application. So all of these moving parts and all these new concepts, why? Well, because as you remember, well, the first thing I have to say is auth component is not going to explode or vanish anytime soon. It's deprecated in CakePHP 4, so we still can enjoy it for a long time. Well, depending on how long are you going to be working on CakePHP 4, but that could last for years. And you don't need to rush for deleting and basically migrating into the new authorization and authentication plugins. They are going to be very useful for you because they provide you a way to decouple that code and also a better way to work on that layer moving forward. But you don't need to rush for refactor your working projects coming from Cake 3, for example, using auth component to get out of auth component and integrate with the authentication. So if you're starting a new project or you feel you have a good chunk of time ahead and you would like to improve the way authentication works in your application, maybe because you feel it's very tightly coupled with the rest of the code in your application, maybe to your controllers, maybe to your models. If you're using some kind of ACL or something, then this could make sense to think about refactoring your code and using authorization. But if not, you're safe to keep on auth component for some time, right? So about the integration and the concepts, right? So we have a new middleware that we need to use. So let's use the middleware. Oh, we don't need this anymore. And okay. There it is. I'm checking my notes here. Okay. So first thing we're going to do is to ensure that we have the plugin loaded. Let's make sure the plugin is loaded. So I'm going to go to my application class, which is over there, and ensure that the plugin is loaded. Around here. This load plugin, plugin load, add plugin, sorry. Add plugin, authentication. Good. Now we have authentication. Well, we actually would be good adding authorization as well. We don't need to, but we are using the plugin, so. Then once we get it, we can go to basically our application and ensure that we add the authorization middleware. Add new authorization middleware. the same way it requires here to pass basically an object that is able to provide the authorization service. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to also pass this object. I'm going to use this object to centralize the configuration for authentication and authorization in my application. Like this. And then I'm going to pass it to the authorization middleware. What's the problem? The problem is we are expecting this object also to implement the authorization service provider interface, right? Which will force me to implement this get authorization service in a similar way than I am implementing the get authentication service, which is it's just a method, a generator method to configure how the authorization service is going to work, right? So how is this going to work? Well, in this case, we're going to talk about, well, a couple things. First thing is the way we add the middleware. Well, let me start talking about these first. This function needs to return an authorization service interface, or in this case, an authorization service. So we're going to create it. We're going to create a new authorization service. And the authorization service will require us to provide some kind of resolver. What is a resolver? A resolver is basically responsible of matching a given resource to a given policy. So the CakePHP plugin, the authorization plugin provides a couple out-of-the-box resolvers. One of them is the map resolver, which is basically providing a map between an object and a policy. The second one is the ORM resolver. I'm going to use this one, the ORM resolver. So with no other configuration, the ORM resolver will be handling basically a translation between an ORM table, an entity, or a query. And based on the name of it, it will extract the policy name that will be placed inside of a class in a given folder of our project. So for now, what we have, I'm going to try to make this understandable. Raise your hand or post anything in the chat if you have any questions, please. And I'm okay going back and forth until everybody's online. But here, basically what we are doing is we are creating a place where we define how the authentication is going to work, how the authorization is going to work. Then the authorization is added as a middleware to our application. How this middleware is going to work? Basically, this middleware will wait until our application request is processed. And after it is processed, it will check if there was an authorization done or not. If there is no authorization done, then we will fail. Right? It will fail with an exception. So how is this going to work? Well, now we have some authorization in place, right? So if I go back to my project, let me go back to my project, this one, and I want to start again. I'm already logged in, right? So I'm going to start a game of 3. If I submit, then, oh, that's That's a problem. Authorization service interface. Get authorization service, implement interface. Non-return. Get out. Well, did I save this one? Possibly not. Return is missing. Yeah, but where? Oh, sorry. Yeah, you're right. Yay. Yes, returning is missing. Thank you for that. So now we should have another kind of exception. That is, a request to this did not apply any authorization check, which is fine because we are not checking anywhere in our code about the authorization to this request. So CakePHP is throwing an authorization required exception, and we get this kind of exceptions. What's the problem at this point? Well, it's not a problem. It's actually a feature and one of the powerful benefits of using authorization, which is authorization is flexible in a way that it will not enforce any placement of the authorization checks. If you remember auth component, you had like a specific place that you could change, right? Because you could hook the event to the startup or to before filter or any other place in your controller life cycle. But now with the authorization, you're not enforced, or there is no convention or defaults on when this authorization check is going to happen, which is something good. On the same, joined with this flexibility becomes the responsibility of ensuring that you do check for authorization at some point, right? You can enforce your own checks in your application, or you can leave it to the controller to check based on the action that you want to check if allowed or not. Let me explain this a little bit. So now what's happening is, because we have this middleware in place, we did go through the application, we got an authorization, we processed the request, but when we are going back to return the response, the middleware is checking that there was no check at all for authorization. And because we are not skipping authorization for this given action, there is an exception thrown. You can ignore this behavior by configuration using skip authorization, if I remember correctly. Let me take a look at that real quick. Authorization, where it is. Well, SEO is not very optimized on this this search. Let me go to GitHub right away. There it is. And if you take a look at the, well, we can actually take a look at the middleware itself. I think it's faster. So you actually have a configuration for it that is the require authorization check, which is true by default. We can set it as false and then ignore this requirement. Like, well, if you didn't define an authorization check for it, doesn't matter. We have no authorization, right? This could be like false. This could be white or allowed denied strategy, where you allow everything unless you check something and it fails. So basically you allow everything in your application this way, right? Everything is allowed, but then if I do an authorization check and fail it, then I will return a forbidding exception. So maybe for an application that does not have a very complex or does not have a high amount of authorization endpoints, this could be an approach to say, okay, I will allow everything by default unless I check for authorization and it fails. And then I return a forbidden exception. Could be a strategy. We don't want this. This could be useful as well for development. So you don't need to, if you don't want to deal with authorization and permissions at that point, you can just build the thing first and then enable the required authorization check and then configure or define the permissions for it. Could be another way. So once we get to this point, we have everything blocked. Okay, we cannot do anything, right? Which is fine because we now need to define a policy so we are able to actually check what's going on here. In this case, what we are going to do is basically define a policy for the tournaments and do a couple examples on tournaments. Before we jump into that, there is another option here in the authorization middleware that will be useful for us at this point, which is the unauthorized handler. The unauthorized handler will allow you to override what will we do if there is some exception at the authorization phase or middleware. In this case, we can inject some configuration here. Like, for example, we can say, oh, we want to redirect to the user's login, right? This is pretty common, so let's cover it. I'm gonna change the unauthorized handler, and we're gonna use some configuration. And I'm gonna use the class name as authorization redirect, and the URL will be something like a user's login, and the query params will be redirect URL. So if we get there, in the case of a failed authentication or failed authorization, and we log back in, we will override the redirect URL and we will go to the previous page we were basically failing the authorization. So going back to here, we go there, and well, remember we are not logged in. Let me log out to show you what happens now, because you will get in this kind of issues the first time you do it. If you do this, you see the request to users login did not apply any authorization checks. Exactly the same problem. And this is related with the removal of the magic around the auth component. So now there are a less amount of defaults or conventions implemented directly in the code. And you basically will need to ensure that your login action is going to be authorized, right? And so you could do this at the authorization middleware, like here, or you could do this at your user's controller. You go to your user's controller, you can say something like, okay, I'm adding unauthenticated actions for the authentication, and at the same time, I want to skip authorization check, I think it was the name. Skip authorization. Let's see. Oh, it is not. Let me remember the name of it. Which is here, and skip authorization. Yeah, this one. Oh, because we don't have the component yet. Okay. we didn't add the component yet into the app controller, so we don't have it available, right? Let me add it real quick. In my app controller, I need to load the authorization component like this, right? So I'm gonna load it. And I can decide here if I skip authorization for the login action, or I configure it in my controller. I don't like the idea of configuring this because any action called login will be not authorized, and maybe for some reason this could be causing any bug in the future. I prefer to go to the controller and skip the authorization here. So register, login, and log out can be done basically ignoring errors for the authorization. And now we have a login in place, and we can hopefully log in and then go back to our previous exception, which is this request did not apply any authorization check. Why? Because, well, in my case, slash is routed to games something. Games play, right? So, well, again, you can go to games play. You could go to games, in this case, games controller. And under play, you could say these authentication, skip authentication, right? Why not? And then, sorry, authorization. Authorization, skip. There we go. And basically what we are doing here is, because we are calling skip authorization, we are telling the authorization service that authorization was skipped, but at the same time, there was an authorization check done. So the value of that flag is true. So when we are going back and get ready for the response through the authorization middleware, the middleware will check this flag and discover if it is true or false. If it is false, exception. If it is true, go on, right? So that's kind of the workflow. We have a middleware. The resolver in this case is basically the ORM resolver. We are not using the resolver yet because we are skipping authorization at this point. We are not using any policy yet, and we did use a component to skip authorization. So now what if we want to actually create a policy and test something or check permissions or on something in the code? Well, we could do this this way. So if you take a look at the documentation of the ORM resolver, it will cover basically entities, tables, and queries. And it will map those things with specific classes under your source policy namespace. So the first thing we want to do is let's define a couple examples here, and let's authorize actions for admin tournaments. Okay, we had tournaments in our project, and we have an admin prefix created. So if you go to the controller, admin, you have here tournaments controller. This controller is basically baked code. We have index, view, all the defaults for a baked controller. So we are going to use this one as it is an easy one, right? And we are going to define a couple rules. For example, we're going to define that the index action for the index action, you will be able to see only the tournaments that you are joined in, that you already joined. So you are a member of the tournament. Let me explain this. First, if you go to the model layer and see here on the tables, you have tournaments and then tournament memberships, which is basically a belongs to many association between a user and a tournament. So you have here a tournament and a user, a belongs to many association between them, and you are basically using it through this belongs to many through association, right? Then in this case, we created also a controller in the admin prefix that is going to be doing pretty basic stuff with them, which is basically listing the tournaments, viewing the tournaments, well, all the creds. So for the index, we want to see only the tournaments that we are members. For the view, the same. We will only be able to view tournaments if we are members of the tournament. We will be able to add any tournament at any time. We will be able to edit only tournaments that if we are members of the tournament. And the same, and we won't be able to delete any tournament ever. Okay. So, well, if we start working on permissions, let's say first we want to add a new tournament, right? Let's start with this one here. I will go to the project again, and I'm going to try to admin tournaments add. Obviously, I'm getting our dear authorization required exception, and we need to fix this case. So how to fix the case? We can go to the add, and then at this point, we can think about who is the resource and what is the action that we want to check, right? So in this case, the resource that we want to check would be the tournament, because we want to check permissions about this tournament. We want to know if the user that is currently logged in through an identity has permission or not to do something on this tournament. So who is going to be the resource? The tournament. What is going to be the action? Add, in this case, or create, right? Whatever you want to call it. So let's see what happens if we use, again, the authorization to check about the permission, right? Then in this case, I will be using the authorization like this. Authorization. Well, let me fix this. I don't have the IDE plugin installed yet in this project, but this is something that I could benefit from. So let me go to the app controller and fix this once and for all. I think we only need this case. App controller. Property, authorization, component, authorization, right? Something like this. So now I can do this authorization and get some inspection. And at this point, we have a number of functions here that we could use. For example, skip authorization that we already know about it. We could also define authorized action or model. We can also check if, well, this is the can result and can, another function here, to check if we could access to a specific resource with a specific action. And then we have authorize, that is kind of a wrapper that will help us to determine the action based on the controller we are in. So if we pass a tournament here, and we say nothing more, the action that we are going to check will be determined by the name of the action of the controller. So this thing here will ensure that we are able, or we have permission to add a tournament. You can actually pass add here, no problem, as the action, right? But, well, you don't need to because we are using conventions for it. So now if I try to add a new tournament, I will get a different exception, which is policy for app model entity tournament has not been defined. So how can I fix this? The ORM resolver is trying to get a policy from a given place in my code. Actually, maybe this specific error could be improved the same way we have the missing template where we can paste an empty policy that we could copy paste. But, well, I take note of that and maybe improve it later. At this point, what we need to do is basically to bake a policy. So if we go to our project and bin cake bake policy, I'm going to bake a policy for, in this case, it is an entity, so for the tournament. So now we have a policy, tournament policy created. And this tournament policy will look like something like this. You go to, to policy, tournament policy, you see it has a couple default methods baked. I'm gonna get rid of all of them to make it very clean. All of this out and all of this out. So what a policy will have is a number of methods, can, and then the name of the action. And then it will, the function will get a user identity and a tournament. In this case, it is a tournament because we are creating a policy for an entity, but it could be something else, right? Depending on the object you are creating the policy for. Keep in mind, the mapper we are using is the ORM mapper. So we are defining policies based on what we have in our database. Basically, we are defining resources based on our tables, our entities, and our queries. But you can define policies for anything you have in your application. For example, you can define policies for the request, or you can define policies for a service, right? To check if a user can use some specific actions inside of a service layer, right? All these things can be defined in a policy through a mapper resolver that will take the, in this case, the service object and map it to the right policy, right? We are just using conventions for today, so explaining a little bit the policy and, well, do a couple of examples. Here, we are going to create a can add function. There are a couple things you can do on policies like renaming or mapping actions to reuse them later as different names, or well, there's some degree of configuration you can use inside of the policy, but for now, let's think about a simple example. So we get to the tournament, we create a can add function, and then we return true. Because anyone can create a tournament, so that's fine. We add this function and return true because anyone can do it. So now if I go back to my code and I try to add a new tournament, very good to add a tournament. And I'm going to add the tournament test. One, expiration date doesn't matter, slug doesn't matter, and good. So we actually added the tournament because if you take a look at it, tournament was, sorry, the tournament was created. We have a flash. We should, at least somewhere. Well, we might have a flash. But the thing here is we are redirecting to the index action, and we don't have a policy for index. I mean, we have a policy, but we don't have any check done on the authorization in the index action. If you remember, we only added a check for the add specific function, which is here. So now next thing would be, okay, now we can create tournaments, which is nice. Now we can browse the tournaments, or you can browse the tournaments you are in. This is done through another feature of the policy, which are scopes. Let me show you here on the index. So one of the features we have is we have the ability to add a scope to a given authorization check. So we can actually scope the query. So we can pass the query to the authorization policy in this case, and the policy can apply usually a finder or some restrictions to the query, so we ensure that every user will see what he is authorized to see in this case. So instead of this, we can refactor it using a query, find, and we can paginate using this authorize, authorization, and then there is a apply scope here that we can use, passing the query to it, right? So how the apply scope is going to work? Basically, it will go through the query and apply or modify the query and return another query, right? Then how can we do, or how can we implement this thing, right? Well, in a similar way, we will need to create a new policy. If we run the index now, you will see the issue is similar. You know, you now see that the tournaments table has not been defined. So we need to define a policy to match the tournaments table in this case. Why the tournaments table? Because the ORM mapper, when you pass a query to it, it will take a look at the policy that is matching the table that is also matching the repository of the query. So if the query is for tournaments table, it will go and look for the tournaments table policy, right? So we need to create another policy. We go to the shell, tournaments table, get it created, and now we should get another issue, which is method scope index has not been defined. Yeah, that's right. So we need to go to our new class, tournaments table policy. We then need to, well, we can get rid of all this. And we can create then a new method, public function scope index, which is going to be having an identity interface as the user, and a query as a query. So I think returning query will be okay, but also maybe not. We'll see. And okay, so what can I do here? Then I'm getting a query, and I need to filter this query by the tournaments that I am in. one of the ways I could do this is returning query matching. I'm going to match with tournament memberships. And the matching function will also use the user. And like this, and like this. And this function will basically return where, and the tournament membership user ID is the user ID, right? So this way, I'm going to filter my scope and get only the tournaments that I am already a member. If I'm not a member, I don't have visibility to the tournament. So then if I go back to my controller, now I'm applying the scope and passing the applied scope to the pagination of the controller. If I go back to my code and reload, I get something. When you call apply scope, it counts as an authorization check. So now you can basically get something. If you take a look at the SQL log, you see that we are actually doing an inner join with tournament memberships, right? So we are ensuring that we are a member of all the tournaments we have visibility, and this is how the scope works. Okay. So this also is a way to extract the authorization scopes and some other checks into another class in another namespace, and then basically reuse all these permissions and policies across several users when needed. You can think about classes per user role maybe that will implement different methods in different ways. So you can then apply the given class based on the role of the user, or if you have some other more complex thing like some ACL in the backend or some inheritance, you can apply the inheritance at this point or anything like that, right? Then that's a scope. And then the last example, okay, you can view any tournaments you are in. Well, this is going to be similar, basically, to what we have. If we go here and, for example, and change the view, I'm going to go to policy over this one, and I'm going to say view, for example. Can view. So who can view a tournament? You can view a tournament if you you do something like return registry, get table locator, get tournament memberships, and well, exists in conditions, and the condition is that the user ID is the user ID, and the tournament ID is the tournament ID, right? So, well, you get it. And obviously we need to apply this formula here in tournaments controller in view at this point. You get the tournament first, right? And then you could say something like this authorization authorize tournament, right? Same time, let's say that this action is more complex, and maybe you have you need to authorize several things. Well, you could create a specific action for it and then reuse those queries inside of the policy, and then reuse it as finders, for example, that you can put in your table, right? But basically, that's how it works. You define resources through a mapper. They go to a policy. The policy will define methods for every different action that you have in your code with that specific object, and obviously that you want to control. And you, at some point in the code, you check for an authorization. Okay, this is going to work for the majority of the projects. If you're looking for this kind of, and also it will help you to build some kind of language inside of your project regarding or related with the permissions. So you will be able to define those actions in a way that the authorization check will make sense. Okay, there's some other things that you could do through authorization, like decorating the identity, so you can actually ask the identity for permissions, or well, mapping and renaming a lot of the stuff to reuse basically the checks across the application. But that's kind of the basic. If you have any questions, let me know. The last thing I'm gonna talk about is what if you only need role-based access control for controller endpoints, and how you can implement this through some of the options available. Before jumping into that, if you have any questions, I'm open to questions. Okay, I'm not gonna stop here. Oh, can I authorize controller actions? Oh, there is a, okay, let me go there. So in the chat first, I have a question. Can I authorize controller actions? This is going to be covered next. In this case, you're looking for an authorization based on the request. So you can basically check if a user can access some request. Again, let me go to the Q&A panel. If I'm able to find it somewhere. See many windows open. Home here. Okay, 7. Okay, that's great. Then Q&A, where is it? Okay, here it is. Okay, good. So first question is, I have the authentication plugin working as I'm using CakeDC users. How do I write a test to log in as a user? Okay, well, in this is a bit out of topic, but that's okay. So when you're working with CakeDC users, I'm gonna answer it live. When you're working with a CakeDC user, let's imagine that you have some test in here. Maybe I have some big one here. No, I can do that. So, well, there it is. Bad boy. Then this games controller here, let's say that you want to mock to have a okay, I see a test to log in as a, okay. Well, the easiest way to do this would be basically, if you're using alt component, to set something on the session before you actually run the test. So if you set the alt user, for example, into the session using use integration, for example, let's say that you want to test this and you want to log in first. What I usually do is at some point you will have some kind of trait created, possibly, that you use in your tests, like use common users or trait or something, right? You will have something like this because this is something that you're going to use a lot. And then at some point on the test, before calling this get, for example, and get the URL you're going to test, like in this case, games play, right? Before you get there, you will need to do something like this session and then set some data to the session, like auth user and whatever user you want, like ID 1 and whatever, right? So when you get it, the session will be populated with the user already, and basically it's already authenticated. Okay, does that answer your question, Matt? Hopefully so. Answer again. If not, I'm gonna mark this and answer live. Okay. There it is. Good. Then Andre, to generate login URL with router, I had to wrap adding provider. Oh, okay. You mean that when you are at this point in the middleware here, right? You want to use this as using the router, right? Well, that's an option. Another option could be something like this, router. URL. Right, something like this. I don't know if this is, again, I don't know if this is the, it was specifically the question, but hopefully so. Let me know. If not, later. I'll keep going. There are another questions.
Yeah, we might have to like jump to the next topics.
Oh yeah, let's jump into the next topic as well. Let's do this because we are short on time. Let's jump into the next topic, which is Mark. You're right, and I'm gonna answer the question here by chat here, so we can keep going, right?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Okay, let's go. Thank you. Stop share and it's all yours.
All right. So let me figure out. Oops. Share and share screen. Okay, can you see something? Can you see my screen?
Yes, all good. Go ahead.
Good. So, first maybe so let's go to the introduction. I'm Mark, and I have been doing some CakePHP core development for quite many years, and I have some plugins. And one of the probably most important one that you most likely will use in your application is the IDE helper. And that's why, yeah, I just thought that maybe it's a good idea to also show how you can quickly make big plugins and how you can do that in a test-driven development way. Also doing the tests first, or at least in parallel, before you actually execute stuff. So let's jump right in. For this, I have a little demo app, which, yeah, not sure if I can go back somewhere else. Yeah, we'll see. Let's start with the bake command for creating a plugin. So for that, we have a command for bake up here, and it's called bake plugin. Bake plugin. Usually this will ask me for a name, my example. Let's use my backend. You can see that it wants to put that into plugins folder, which is fine. We start with plugins directly in the application. So we don't composerize them yet. We don't put them into Composer. We just want to make them available directly for us. So we'll bake all the necessary stuff. We want it to automatically adjust the autoloader. So this is what this is going to do. And if you go to the repository now, you will see that it added the plugin in the bootstrap automatically. This is not always needed, but it's fine. And you can see that it added the PSR4 autoloader changes for it. So it finds exactly what it needs inside of the source directory and the tests directory for the tests later. All of that is done automatically now with this one command. Then, now that we have a command, we have a plugin. Looks like this. It's very basic yet. There's not much in here. The source directory only contains a plugin and the app controller, which usually I delete. I don't need them. I directly use the application controller here, but it's fine to keep this one for now as well. Let's say we want to create some CRUD application in the backend. So for this, we bake a migration file. Migration posts. So we want to make some posts. Oh, that was my mistake. I should have put that into the plugin. -p my backend. It just created that on the application level, which I didn't want. Now it looks good. Now we have our plugin, which can handle, well, it cannot handle yet, but it wants to handle posts. To speed up a little bit, I prepared a small snippet that I'm just going to paste in here, which contains posts, and it adds a column, title. It adds 2 more columns for created and modified, and in the end it creates it. So that's about it. And this I just run by using in cake migrations migrate -p my backend. Okay, executed. Now we should be able to bake the controller and model and view and so on. So if you go back to bake, or posts -p my backend. Yeah. The bake got lost. All done. Now we should have a complete CRUD application here. And ideally, it should also be executable in the browser. So if we go to the my backend, posts, right? Yeah, there we go. Now we have already the ability to add posts. Just something to see. The bake templates are not adjusted for Bootstrap 4, at least not this version, so that's why it looks a little bit scrambled. So we just ignore that. It's really just a demo application to have some visible output in the view. Now, what we want to start doing is, for example, testing whatever we add. So let's look into how a test case for example, this controller would look like. Inside of tests, we have a post controller test and we have a post table test. Let's start with the table test first. So here we can see that it generated all that stuff already for us. And a few tests are missing yet. So we can make a very first test, which would just be test add. So we want to create an entity which we know contains at least a title. That's necessary for sure. My title. And we assign it to a post entity. And then we just save it. This posts, save. We can either use save or fail. Then we don't need the assert, or at least we can use the assert for something else. If we just use save, we would need to assert afterwards for sure. So save or fail. And we can still assert, for example, that the created and modified have been set. So assert maybe not empty, posts created and post modified. Yeah, that's ideally what we want to find out when we test now this post table test. So let's see. Vendor bin PHP unit, then plugins, my backend, tests, test case, my model table, and then post table test. It's green, so that worked. Now, based on posts table, based on the validation here, it seems to be required to be not empty and not empty. So we can just check pretty quick if that's really the case. Yeah, so it definitely already works. So we want to, and now we can add here more business logic. So if your posts automatically create a slug, then you could do a assert same. The slug would be my title, post slug, stuff like that. You can add more business test cases around all that before you actually further go higher. The next higher level from the model perspective would be the controller. So here we do integration testing instead of just functional or even unit testing. So in the controller, we have stubs for all the actions. And usually what I do here is I'm just testing. And that's maybe just useful to know. I'm using CakePHP 4.1 already. So what's already in beta and will soon be released as release candidate and stable. By the way, my camera is not on, right? Not that it matters, but how can I activate it? never mind. So I'm using CakePHP 4.1, and here you can use this new tool, URL array. And this is pretty handy because here you can pass a string of already exactly the controller index action. So instead of creating a manual array, you can use everything at hand already that the IDE helper can generate for you. So let's run the IDE helper pretty quick. And that's usually PHP Storm generate. So in my case, for this IDE, you can create an updated meta file. And you will see now that the meta file contains quite a few more entries here in the meta file. So now we can directly select posts, hopefully. Doesn't work yet. Maybe I need to force reload. Let's see. All the other actions are going, but not this one. Ah, interesting. It does not find it like this, but it finds it when I do my backend. Okay, interesting. So you need the plugin first, and then you can here now select whatever you need. So this is quite fast for selecting now the index action to test. And in the end, usually you assert on the content or the response code. So in our case, we can do response code 200 because we know it's going to be 200. And we don't need all the others now. We can delete them. We can do a smoke test also on add. Should also be 200. Let's see. So controller. Yeah, so it's green and the 2 skip tests are below. Those are edit and delete. I can remove them. Then it should be fully clean. Yeah. Now, what you also want to test usually is, in this case, if posting works. Yeah? If posting and storing the data works. So most of the time, I'm just copying and I'm just adding a post suffix of some sort, and I'm posting now to that data with some data. And the data itself, let's keep it empty for now. What do we expect? We expect a redirect. So if it's successful, it should redirect back to the index page, right? Let's see. And it's actually not a 302, it's a 200. The reason is that whatever we post right now is not valid. So if we add something, the view usually gives us for sure this one field, which is a title. So my title. And with this now, we expect it to pass. So before I even execute it in real life, I'm actually already having some of the tests ready if I want to. And it works. Yeah. And now the lower levels on table have been approved, and the posts controller is also working apparently. And if we execute it now for real, as we did before, it would show the same results. And you can do that for edit, you can do it for delete, you can do it for custom actions as well. All right, let's add something more complicated. Let's imagine we want to have some service. Service is a plugin that I've hooked in. It's called Bursum CakePHP Service Layer, and it allows some encapsulation of business logic. So you can put business logic into a offloaded class. So let's bake it. We should be able to bake that. Bake service. Okay. Let's just use something very simple as business logic, a calculator. Calculator. And of course, we need the plugin again for my backend. So it created a service, which is called calculator. Here it is. Let's add something very basic into it. Maybe this one. So we're just adding stuff and returning, and that's it. So this calculator service, we can unit test right away. Before we actually implement it anywhere in our high-level controller or something, we can write test case. The plugin itself offers only a bake for the actual class, so we need to do old school copy-paste for the test case. So we know it's a service layer, and I'm copying something over and call it service calculator service test. So calculator service test, just come back. And here we know it's service. We don't need fixtures and anything else. We just need, we also don't need that. Actually, we can for now. Result is service at 1 and 3, and we know that asset same of result should be 4. Now, whatever complicated logic you have, it's simplified for now. We now have a test case that is a unit test for this specific method, and you can add infinite amounts of unit cases for all kinds of edge cases as well. What happens if you do 0? What happens if you do -1? Doesn't matter. Now let's execute this test. Should be in the service layer. It's green. So we have a unit test for this specific service. And what I also want to run, of course, is my PHP Storm generate. The reason I will show in a second. It will update the meter file again. And inside my posts controller, I'm going to add the service aware trait, which has the same kind of way of working like load model. So instead of load model, I can now anywhere, for example, in the index page, do also this load service call. And thanks to the IDE helper I just ran, it should have, oops, so it has 3 demos available, and the one we are interested in is the calculator. So, bam, there we go. Now, you might find that the calculator is not auto-completed here. Yes, that's true. For this, we can run a different command on the plugin itself, which is called annotate, comes also from the IDE helper, annotate all -p my backend minus verbose would just display what we're doing. So you can see that it fixes even some other things, but most importantly, it adds our calculator service. So now we can actually autocomplete. And it even knows the methods, of course, add. So we can also do here 1.1 and 4 maybe. And the result we can also give to the view. And the view itself, which is probably called index on posts. Here we could maybe even before the posts have a new headline result and just display result. Usually, if you don't know if it's safe, you can also put it around H. And just to make it more visible, we put it in a code tag. So let's go back to our posts and see what happens. And it's there. So before I even know that 5 is the correct result, I printed the unit testing around different kind of business logic classes or helpers or anything else can be fully tested before you're integrated in the whole thing, so that your controller test ideally has only testing about specific response codes and high-level integrational things, but it shouldn't need to care about if the result, as of the plus result here, the 5, is actually true, because it's harder to here assert the content, right? Because all the layout is completely together and everything. So whatever you can do before that on lower levels, you should do. That's why I would prefer this way. Are there any questions so far? It doesn't look like it, right? Anything I missed? Well, I guess this would probably be my introduction in very basic test-driven development then. Feel free to put something into the questions and answers, or post something that you want to know more about. Let me see if I can get my camera back. Ah, now it works. While I'm sharing, I can't put my camera on.
Mark, there is a question there.
Where?
In the Q&A.
Now I see it. Can you explain mocking? I know this is more advanced. I'm not sure how much time we got today. What is the time schedule on that? I can really quickly go over it. Mocking you should always avoid. Yeah. So it's like the devil is in the detail, and if you mock too much, the danger is that your tests are actually green, but your application will crash completely. So mocking you do when you have external API or in any way stuff that is currently not really relevant to this specific issue that you're testing, and you want to encapsulate away. Like this currently has no meaning, and or it's too slow for performance reasons because of external API requests. And then you test that separately, like unit tests for that, but you don't care for the specific tests. Here it's okay and fine to do mocking. But if you're on the unit testing already and like very, very down to the specific classes, then too much mocking here can usually create these false assumptions of everything is fine, and refactoring actually kills stuff silently. So yeah, I think that's what I would summarize it as. Yeah, endpoints you mock and all these things, yeah. There's one question, slightly off topic, but you showed services. So I take this chance to ask, do I use services to communicate with an external server, web service, or is it better to use behaviors? Well, behaviors are on the model layer, and they are very, very close coupled to those models, also the table classes. Therefore, I wouldn't put too much into the behavior itself, but I would put it into a library. Now, this doesn't have to be a service. Services here are just auto-loaded the way I showed you. So they have this nice way of quickly getting you up and running without having to use my new library something. And so that's a bit cleaner in a way, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that. You can also use some other library. Yeah. Okay, I think that's it. Then I hand it back to you.
You is me. You're muted. Okay, so
Yes.
thank you, Mark.
Yes, you.
Look, about mocking is I remember this one. I've been using this one in a couple times some time ago. I don't know if it is still working, but you have the PHP VCR project. Mark introduced this, I think, a couple years ago in a Cake Fest. Let me paste the URL here in the chat. This is like severe monkey patching in the PHP code to replace the stream as it comes from an external source, like a network call or a socket. So you can actually patch through the socket if you're trying to have a very heavy mocking when calling a third-party API. Again, I don't know if it still works because I'm not been using it recently, so I don't know if anyone is.
I actually use a different trick, or I think it's actually not that different. It's actually quite similar. I use also a file cache trick by using the --debug flag on PHP unit to recreate it based on the real API. So every whatever days I want to. But by default, it would be mocked using a file cache of some sorts. And this way, because I think I use it in the geo plugin, also the geocoding, because it's every API request to Google costs money. And therefore you want to not do that in a Circle CI or Travis CI every daily, but you want to do it when you actually want to make sure that the real API is still working. And then you just cache them away again and use the file cache.
Yeah, I remember using this one, and it was very funny because the third-party provider actually changed the name of one parameter, and we catch the issue with their API because there was a diff in the in the response coming, and they say no, there was no actual changes on the API. Yes, there is one change. I know for sure. So that was good. And yeah, some kind of this also for payments like Stripe or something like that. This could be useful.
Yeah, and the nice thing about this kind of file caches, if you cache those files in a way that they are persisted in Git, you can see the diff. So over time, you can see how they changed and what changed. So that's also nice. It's not that hidden away then if like they add parameters or drop them or something like that. But yeah, either way, whatever works, I guess.
Okay. Show your helicopter.
The batteries are empty, I think.
Okay, let me share here because we get into lightning talks, and I think we're good on time. So if you have any ideas for a lightning talk, if anyone wants to come in and talk about anything, something he's doing, ideas for other developers, something we can learn from, that could be useful for all of us. So raise your hand and let us know. No one.
They seem to be more the listener kind of type, not so much talking.
Yeah, well, that's okay as well. I mean, some other general questions, if you have any. Now it's time. If you want to jump in and raise any topic that we could help with, or explain something that's happening in your project, or have something to share, that's going to be fine. It's a meetup, so feel free to, I mean, we're kind of flexible here. There is no fixed schedule today, so hopefully everything is going right. Any feedback is welcome as well. If you feel that this is going to be, this is useful so far or not, just let us know. We can discuss it. You can do a lightning talk in Lightning. Why not? I would say if it is CakePHP related, it's fine for me. Or even if it is not, if it is going to be useful, it's fine for me as well.
I think
Lightning
you can
talks
also
can be on any subject whatsoever.
Hey, Larry.
I did a lightning talk on how to shave before.
Well, say hey properly, Larry. Say hi.
Hello, everyone. This is Larry Masters, PHP nut. I've just been hanging out to see how this second meetup's going. Any feedback you can give us, any topics that you would like to see brought up at these meetups. I think we're going to try to do this on a regular basis now, with all the issues of trying to meet people in person. I think we're going to see a lot more of the events that we do being broadcast like this. Going to lower the cost too. So there's no cost to do this other than our time. And if you will all commit to showing up and spending your time, we'll set aside our time to put together the best information for all of you.
Well, I think we'd love to do this on a regular basis, like monthly or something. Actually, my suggestion for today to raise it as a topic was to try to find a time zone for the next one that is going to be more or a schedule that is going to be closer to the other part of the world, like to cover the Japanese community, because I know they are also wanting to participate, and this time is killer for them. So maybe the next one we could find another time, but we can openly discuss it, no problem. So we can think about doing it early in the morning for us. So it's going to be at some decent hour for them, so they can join as well. Could be an option. There's some comments here in the chat. Yeah, I agree. And actually, this is this was a great initiative from Mark to bring the online meetups. I think the format is great to make it more flexible and relaxed, and try to have some fun as well. We're gonna give the traditional or regular training sessions we do for newcomers and unit tests, and also possibly add some training soon for authentication and events. But that's kind of a structured session where we cover a set of topics, even if we derail a lot on the sessions. But I think this format is great to keep in touch with the community and talk with other developers and see what's going on in the core and other plugins, and people having their own plugins come in and show what they did and ask for ideas, etc. So, yep. Then there is this comment about regular meetups. I like that. And Mike was not prepared for a talk today, but Wondering if a plugin to support hierarchical data storage in MySQL. Okay, well, what's the use case? I mean, you have it already? You want to talk about what the plugin does? I can add you to, let me add you so you can speak.
He said he's not prepared yet, but maybe next time. But yeah, we can speak anyways.
Okay, well, you don't need to be prepared. Just talk about what it does.
True.
You've been promoted. That's my kid in the background. So go ahead and let us know. I don't know if you have a specific use case in your company for the plugin, or it is done, or you're working on it already.
Yeah. Sorry. I'll try to make this up as I go here. My name is Mike Tallroth. I'm in the U.S. and I work for a company that one of the tools that we're using right now, or we've created, is a tool that keeps track of components, electronic components. And one of the things that we realized early on was that a lot of the components have similar attributes, but then as you get more specific, components tend to have different attributes than as you get farther down a hierarchical tree, trying to categorize the components. And keeping the attributes straight from one to the other and still being able to search across the common attributes. The data structure that we came up with is something that provides you the ability to search across all the components without having to have a really wide data table. And if I just was trying to throw it out there to see if anybody has run across a problem similar to that, and if they've solved it some other way, or if they'd be interested in seeing more about what I've got. So that's what I can come up with in 2 minutes.
Is this like some implementation of an STI strategy? I remember there is some work done on single table inheritance already somewhere. I think there was a plugin somewhere about it. Let me look for it.
Okay, it is. Yeah, it's not an extension of that. I guess I'm not familiar with that. This was original work, but I'm not saying that it's unique. You know, maybe someone else came up with something like it. There's different data structures that use types and values when things are similar but different. And this takes it a little bit further than that. Those are pretty generic concepts, though. It's not an extension of any particular plugin.
Okay.
So
I remember this.
That's all. Just looking for some feedback, seeing if anybody has data problems that are similar to that.
Well, I think it is a pretty common problem that you have groups that share common attributes, and then you want to search through all these groups. And if I can say something, last time I had a problem like this, we basically fixed the search. Well, it's not the same, right? But we fixed it through index generation in an Elasticsearch database. But I would like to see how did you fix the same problem through MySQL?
Yeah, okay. I'll try to prepare something for next month then.
Awesome. Send us an email, and we will add you as part of the next schedule for the next online meetup, or just jumping in a lightning talk. No problem.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thank you. So Dwayne, environment, IDE, Docker, etc., setup and optimization would be great. Yeah, I agree. Maybe this could be an interesting topic for the next session and provide different options. So you can use Vagrant, Cakebox, or Docker specific, how to switch through different PHP versions. Well, things like that. That could be useful for development. Yeah, I like that.
Maybe we should put it on the next agenda, as specifically the Docker setup. I think it's pretty needed as well. Like many people are asking for this.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, I'll process a chat later and create a couple items based on the feedback here for the next day. That's great. Starting screencasts about CakePHP. Well, that's an idea it's been around for some time, and I know there's some effort done in screencasts. It's not there yet. Maybe Larry could have any more input on this, but I think he was doing something about screencasts some time ago. Larry, still around?
Yeah, I'm still here. And I don't really have any update on that. I had just some things going on. It hasn't allowed me to get time to even upload the last videos from CakeFest, which I'm hoping over the next couple of weeks I'll be able to get those uploaded. But yeah, there's some screencast ideas that we put up before we put out a request, and we had some, good ones come in. Things have kind of changed with the latest changes of the framework. And, if you have any ideas of a screencast that you'd like to see, if there's something specific, just let us know, and we'll put that into the queue and start getting some of them out, hopefully when things settle down around here.
Okay, then yeah, NoSQL implementation within MySQL. I think this comment is related with a plugin that we were discussing previously. Then James saying that, yep, okay, asking questions here. Queue background process topic. Yeah, I'm totally up to. And I think
definitely
Mark,
an important one.
the man.
Well,
so,
if the other Queue plugin is not ready yet, or no one else wants to do it, I'm happy to show my plugin. Sure.
There is Jorge González as well, and wasn't it there CakePHP under another one being created under a CakePHP umbrella?
I think it's still alpha. I think it's for Cake 4, but it's still alpha, I think. And the other ones are battle tested. Mine doesn't have any dependencies, and the one from Jose has this. Yeah, I think it needs some installation of some services to run. Not sure.
The Jorge González one?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it has a couple backends. I mean, any of them will work because, and yours, I think you are around, so it's the best choice to talk about it. So I like I think that's a great topic to discuss, talking about queue background processes, because that's pretty, but I don't know, like 90% of the projects I've been working on recently are using some kind of queue processing. So that's pretty common nowadays.
And the ones that don't use a queue usually should also be using a queue somewhere.
Yeah.
Sending emails or processing asynchronous stuff. Yeah.
Okay. Then yeah, that's that one, Andril, I posted after you. So that's specifically the plugin I was talking about. And then using prepared statements. Yeah, we could talk about prepared statements in as a topic as well in the next one. I saw service today the first time. I wonder if there's more features that are not shown directly after installation. Well, a lot, because the framework is always a struggle to try to provide the minimum the minimum common set of features useful for everyone. So the rest of the things are provided in plugins, and there are a lot of gems out there unknown. But if you go to the awesome list, you will find some of them there. I would recommend you to watch that repo and check for the new additions, because they are really good stuff being added to the list, and very good plugins out there that are providing a lot of useful features. Key plugin. Oh, last time we had some lightning talks for React PHP thingy. Yeah. Yeah, well, I can show you this one. That's something I've been using, especially for non-blocking stream access for some other projects we've been working with. And I could work on I could prepare some code for the next session and show you how to deal with an API using React PHP inside of CakePHP and using an unblocking stream access, which is insanely fast. So it's gonna be funny to show. Yeah, can do that. Awesome. Yeah. Well, that's very good feedback. Thank you for that. Do you have any other thing out of your mind? Hey.
Example of bulk email notifications.
Yeah, that could work inside of a queue worker plugin as well, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, this is already very specific, like a very specific use case.
Well, bulk email sending is, yeah. I hope through another third-party service, and they actually provide you bulk sending emails. So if not, you're gonna have problems immediately with having your mail server blacklisted. So especially in bulk emails. Actually, Google is very picky with it. If they get like a burst of emails, they blacklist you almost immediately. So it's a good way to burn an IP. Okay, well, I think we could wrap it up. Unless you have any last words, I think we're good. Excellent. Thank you, everyone. We will post a recording soon, so you will have it available, and you can recreate on our mistakes. And yeah, that's it. Go for it, and let us know. We'll be there in Slack. Any topics you have, any ideas, and also if you are up to becoming a presenter, that would be great. Also, if you're working on some on some cool project in your company and you want to show us how are you using the framework, that's going to be also a good topic for others to get ideas on how to apply the framework or plugins, etc. So.
Yes, also from my side, it was nice having such a large audience again for the second time now in such a short period of time. And yeah, as we said before, we want to do this monthly, and we'll probably prepare something already for the next weeks and like post it in the channels that you know and inform you all about it. Perfect.
Oh, that's great. Also, we created cakephp.org/meetups, which is a static page that you can contribute to actually through a pull request. And we're going to keep it for the next meetups. And we're going to work on it to create a history of all the meetups. And I'm going to link the slides and the video, so you have a reference to search for any specific content.
I think the way you just put it in the chat, I'm not sure if people can read it. It's two panelists. I think you have to readdress to everyone.
Yeah, you're right. This chat changes every time.
I did the same mistake earlier, and then I was wondering if people could actually see my answers.
meetups like this. Okay, much better. Oh, next online meetup is none yet. So but we will have one soon. Okay, so thank you very much. I'll be around. Thank you for attending today. It was a pleasure for all of us, and we hope you enjoyed, you learned something, and also for next time, bring something new so we can all share how are you enjoying using the CakePHP framework. Thank you very much, and talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.
Ciao, ciao.